This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 7th of December 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, split over Christmas lockdown. In the Standard, the road to Damascus. And in the Star, we have BBI dilemma, RUTO reduces his tough demands. Let us begin with the Standard, the road to Damascus.
Yes.
So here we have, in case you didn't know, the road to Damascus is a situation in which someone experiences a sudden change or complete change in their opinion or beliefs. And this is based on Paul's conversion to Christianity. It's a story in the Bible, the New Testament.
Yes.
And
so RUTO is on the road
to Damascus. He's having his
so to Paul moment.
Pauline moment or Damascene moment. Anyway, so they're saying, the Standard is saying that DP has softened his resolve, and he only now has two issues with BBI that is separating him from the yes vote, which is the election of women MPs and the multiple choice referendum.
Yes.
So he's basically all yes. I know last week we were saying that he has been occupying the middle ground, which he has, because he preaches water and drinks wine. He has been telling, you know, to his boss, the president, that he's all for it, save for a few issues. But it seems like to his allies, he was telling them to really, you know, do the movement and the groundswell for a no campaign. However, Ruto's allies from Mount Kenya have apparently been chatting a deal with Kenyatta's side, we are told.
Yes.
And they also say that Ruto says he would rather opt out of the referendum debate should it become increasingly divisive.
Yes.
But who's making it divisive? None other than him. It makes no sense.
Absolutely.
He's just saying he has two issues now.
Oh my
At least
gosh.
it went from 5 to 2. Next week we'll have one. The week after,
none will be
our
full yes.
gift. So, and then it's thought that Kenyans may have voter apathy after the year that we've had, dealing with the pandemic and a slow, you know, economy, and that having a referendum may be tricky.
Yes.
So we're being told that he's coming to the table.
You know, voter apathy is not necessarily a bad thing. By the way,
because the threshold for referendum is very low.
You don't even need 50% plus one. And the voter turnout, what, 2005 referendum was 55%. Yeah. 2010 it was 75%. Yeah. But that's even not where I'm going. Yeah. I asked myself, there must be a reason why the deputy president really wants a multiple choice referendum. Yeah. And my thinking is this: 2005. My hypothesis is that the ECK Electoral Commission of Kenya gave Raila Odinga a win by saying that the referendum will be suggested in two choices. Yes, banana, no orange. All right. By then, a background of acceptance had already been created against the yes side, all right, which was led by Mwai Kibaki. Yeah. And country was organized around no. So it was very easy for everybody to say no and also create huge public outcry against the yes side. This man has studied the referendum process. Yeah. And I'll apply my mind on this much later. But I think if you focus on the choices more and in a binary fashion, the chances of you creating a groundswell against BBI are much higher. And I think that's a game plan he's going for. And look, if he really wanted to speak about women issues and two-third gender rule, like he's advocating for now, he would have done so when two-third gender rule was actually an issue in Parliament. I don't know. Long and short of what I'm saying is, I don't think he's being honest.
He's not being genuine.
William Ruto's endgame is 2022.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that this guy is out to create a bit of a crisis and see how he can benefit from it. Yes, of course, we may have voter apathy because of the year that we've had. Yes. But the actual truth of the matter is that by having a multi-choice referendum, you actually do create more apathy. You create fatigue because people really have to go through one by one of the issues. But I think what's very strange to me is we forget that we had a steering committee that spent 2 years on the ground asking Kenyans what were the most important issues to them. This constitutional amendment bill didn't come out of air. you know, it came out of, you know, the opinions and concerns that Kenyans themselves presented. And so the only reason you have a multi-situation referendum is if you're trying to gauge what people are thinking. But if this referendum is based on those thoughts already, we already know what's going to happen. So I think this guy is just trying to use an experiment in Kenya to create more, you know,
chaos and rebellion.
More chaos,
so it has been said that consensus means that everyone agrees to say collectively what no one believes individually. Maybe that's what we mean with consensus. We have a 3-part criteria that we will use to break down the headlines. We'll ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? The road to Damascus was particularly nice, that I thought. And the star was also good, right? Because it's essentially telling us what RUTO is now doing, what he's supposed to do, right? He's reduced his demands.
Absolutely.
Let us look at the Daily Nation and then we can make a decision.
Really quickly, Daily Nation split over Christmas lockdown. So the National Response Committee on COVID-19 is meeting today to discuss what measures they may make or give to the president for the upcoming Christmas holidays. So they're afraid that with the festivities, cases are likely to increase. I think right now we're at about 10% positivity rate. They're afraid it'll go up to 20. So they're trying to decide, should we have a lockdown or should we shut down bars, restaurants, reduce the amount of people who can go for funerals, weddings, and so on. I think so far they've ruled out the lockdown idea. But I guess at this point, it's, you know, this toss-up. Do we do the lockdown and tell people they can't move? Or do we make businesses suffer even more than they already have? So I think that's a very tight position that we're in right now.
And then we're in the context where a lot of European countries were entering their second round of lockdowns, isn't it? And they're ending just before Christmas. So perhaps if we're going to do more stringent measures, perhaps we should have done them before Christmas, before the festivities. The other thing maybe we can borrow from the West is implementing the idea of a tiered lockdown. So not everybody is getting the same sort of lockdown measures. So where it's a hotspot, then you implement those sort of stringent measures.
But unfortunately, in that case, Nairobi would suffer the hard loss.
I'm of the view we cannot afford a lockdown. Paris, London can afford one. We cannot afford one. And look, the CS Treasury was saying that there is a problem getting revenue. KRA is having a problem generating revenue. And look, the first charge of a consolidated fund is debt obligations, right? You collect money, first thing you pay off is Eurobond. You pay the Chinese or that kind of thing. Now, if your debt obligations, let's assume is what, 600, 700 billion shillings out of a budget of 3 trillion shillings, it means that 1 shilling out of every 4 shillings generated goes to pay debt. Now, if you cannot collect even 1.6, 1.7 trillion shillings, then what basis do you have to impose a lockdown? It means your economy will suffer.
We need to call Magufuli where Corona ended so we can figure it out. So guys, who do we give our winning headline? I propose the Standard, the road to Damascus.
Absolutely.
There you have it. Standard gives us our winning headline. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Standard is still on sabbatical, so we will do the Daily Nation.
Yes, absolutely. And there you have IGA, and that is a drawing of a man going to Treasury, doctors going to Treasury, and they're protesting. And behind the Treasury booth, there is BBI, a fellow with the BBI Reggae. They've gotten funds for BBI, and the doctors are there protesting, asking for
money, but Treasury
for more
says
salaries. But Treasury says there's nothing in the pocket. Rubbish cartoon.
But I think it was also in the context of the doctors striking, the nurses are striking, saying they don't have any PPE material. I would suggest something radical, as Turan would say. Right now, we know that KEMSA is sitting on 3 billion worth of PPE and mask. And just because there's a probe going on into how it was procured, it can't move. I suggest that the government should just release it and we deal with the issue later instead of having doctors striking, nurses striking. Just a solution.
It just needs political will. That's all it needs. But you can be sure, which CEO out there who is going to release money, knowing the kind of furore previous scandals, of course. There is no one who's going to release money. And
not release money. They're sitting on the worth of it.
And I'm telling you, they even if they do, they can either sell it, number one, or Treasury releases about 1 billion shillings to offset these PPE things, the ones in the store.
Do we pack this cartoon?
No, we toss it.
I think we toss it.
Onto the star, where we have a guillotine, and on one side you have General Badi, and he's looking over at Sonko, who's walking off with the head, holding his head. And the caption there is, "I'll be back. I have escaped very difficult situations before." And he's taken a very long footstep, very long march. I like it.
Yeah, so I think there was a cartoon he did last week while Sonko was approaching the guillotine. So I guess this is a continuation where his head is off.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It says Sonko has assembled a team of top lawyers.
Oh yeah, I mean, for his impeachment at the Senate now.
Yeah, I think it's a wrap for him. Anyway,
I think the guy's going home.
Yeah, it's a wrap for him. Anyway,
can we give the star a winning cartoon?
My winning cartoon.
We have no choice, do we?
It's humorous. There you have it. The star gives us our winning cartoon. And now for our final thought, but before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled Essential Stories, The Chinese Civil War from 1945 to 1949.
Yes, so this week we'll be looking at some of the greatest civil wars that ever happened. I don't know if you can call a civil war great, but it's okay. So we'll look at the Vietnamese Civil War, Nigerian Civil War, Congolese Civil War, and the American Civil War. But as Tuam said, today we start with the Chinese Civil War. So when most students learn about the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war, a lot of the time we focus on Germany or the repercussions that were placed upon them as the main focus. But there's so much more to what happened during the treaty discussions and what it actually meant for other countries. So today we'll actually look at what the Treaty of Versailles meant for China and how it spurred or encouraged the Civil War to continue. So the Chinese Civil War was quite a long one, from 1927 to 1949, and it was one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. It took the lives of 6 million soldiers and civilians, and it was fought between two parties. The first was the Kuomintang, the KMT, or the Nationalists, and the other was the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, which was led by Mao Zedong. And both groups claimed sovereignty over the land and people of the entire of China. And so what you have, just a bit of background, is when the Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911, you ended up having this power vacuum in China. And there were short stints of power grabbing and power holding by various groups. But after World War I, Japan was granted these spaces and these territories in China. And this led to young students trying to resist this entry of Japan into their country that led to these massive protests in the summer of 1919. And so out of these protests, the Nationalist Party, also known as the KMT, was born, and you begin to see Chinese really clinging tightly to their former glorious days when Chinese culture was dominant and they were seen as a superior country. But by 1921, you have the teachings of Karl Marx, Lenin, and the Russian Revolution finding their way into the country, especially to the long-suffering peasants of China. And shortly after this, you have the birth of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, which was formed as a direct challenge to the KMT. And so the CCP and the KMT spend lots of years fighting against each other. Sometimes they unite against a common enemy, but it didn't last for long. So while we see the Civil War technically lasting for 22 years, it was on and off with different conflicts, with each side dominating at different time periods. But by the time World War II comes to an end, the communists gain power over China, and they established the People's Republic of China, what we know today, and they forced the leadership of the Republic of China, which was the KMT, to retreat in exile to Taiwan. And so you have this lasting political and economic standoff between these two groups. And you have the ROC in Taiwan, but then you have the PRC in mainland China, both of them at the same time claiming to be the legitimate government of China. And so no armistice or peace treaty has ever been signed, even up till 2020. And a debate really continues to engage about whether the Civil War has actually ever ended. They haven't had any physical fights of recent, but there's still this tension, and both of them claiming to be the legitimate government of China. So very long and interesting story.
You know, Tuje, I have never been able to pronounce Versailles. Versailles. Now, I want to tell you guys about the origins of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Now, during World War I, in the hope of contributing to the Western Allies and gaining recognition of its rights, China declared war on Germany in 1917. However, in the Versailles Peace Agreement of 1919, where they cut up Africa like a cake, Chinese claims were simply ignored. Now, China was actually informed at Versailles that all the territories it had would actually not be restored, or all the territories it had lost would actually not be restored. Now, Chinese provinces previously occupied by Germany were handed over to Japan. When news got back to China that this would be the case, the Chinese were up in arms. The masses took to the streets, you know. Now, and they did this to protest against the humiliation at Versailles and the failure of the Republican government to resist imperial tendencies. Okay, so they began this movement, which was called the May 4th movement, inspired by intense nationalism, which called for the restoration of China's independence and the elimination of foreign domination. Now, the May 4th movement in 1921 gave birth to a radical party known as the Chinese Communist Party, which was born in Shanghai. Its main founder was a peasant farmer known as Mao Zedong from Hunan province. He was a revolutionary before he was a Marxist. Mao was inspired by Marxist leanings and the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution against the imperialist Tsar, Sir Nicholas II. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is and has always been China's ruling party. And that's how the Chinese Communist Party came to life. Now, I want to draw some parallels here. There was a revolutionary who was a peasant farmer at 28 years old. He was a peasant farmer. Here we know of someone who stays somewhere in Karen, who wants to start a revolution when he's a billionaire and is probably trying to replicate Mao Zedong's methods. I don't know whether you know who that person is.
Oh my God, I have no idea who you're talking about. But it was interesting reading up on the Chinese Civil War. The reason why Mao was so successful, actually, to follow on from 2M, is probably because he was a peasant, much like, you know, the people he was trying to lead. You know, he grew up knowing their very, you know, plight. It was actually during the Long March of 1934 that Mao Zedong gained control of the Communist Party as its primary leader. So the Long March came after the Nationalist Party had running battles with the CPC, and they ended up killing a lot of the Communist Party. So to protest, they decided, or Mao decided, that they were going to do a 6,000-mile long march. It was called the Long March. And in this Long March, the main aim was to establish a rural base to promote guerrilla warfare. Simple as that. And he also stated, Mao stated, that the significance of the Long March was, firstly, to be the first of its kind in history, that it was a manifesto, a propaganda force, and a seeding machine. However, as much as it had really high hopes, there was only about an 8% success rate of the marches. Some were killed, some were too tired to make the 6,000-mile march. It started with over 100,000 people. It only ended with 8,000 people reaching a place called Kiangxi or something, Kiangxi, the first, leaving Kiangxi, going to another area. And so, why Mao was so successful against the Nationalist Party, I believe, was because he was building up an agrarian revolution. So he was speaking directly to the needs of the peasant population. And if you contrast that to the Nationalist Party, you find a situation where Chiang Kai-shek, who was the leader at the time, was so focused on his military power, and he was so focused on winning the war against the communists that he forgot to meet the needs of his people. So for instance, he had the principles of people's livelihood, which was a great policy on paper because it promoted equal distribution of land and regulation of capital, but they were never put into practice. So you have a situation where Chiang really focused on defeating the Communist Party, and Mao really focused on letting the people know the philosophy behind the revolution. And I think that's why it was such a success. And don't forget that the Red Army was getting a lot of support from the Russians, the Soviets. And that's how they became so well trained. And so you can imagine a situation where the Nationalist Party was fighting with the Japanese for a long time. And then you have the peasant, communist army sort of in its wings, getting bigger, getting stronger, less tired, less apathetic about, fighting for a cause. So you have those two contrasts. And so they say Chiang went wrong because, you know, he firstly mishandled the interaction with the Japanese, the war with the Japanese, and people were very dissatisfied with how he did it. So it was right for communist takeover.
But doesn't it show how important it is to define whatever your philosophy is?
Exactly.
You can't just say you are this thing and not explain it, and then also not implement it. It's equally as important.
Exactly, exactly. And so I will end with this. On a day where we had a winning headline from the Standard and a winning cartoon from the Star, Chiang, the leader of the Nationalist Party, was the same man who once said, "Only through unity can we save our country and our people." Yet he lost his power trying to destroy the opposing political party in China, the Communist Party. And so what Chiang wanted was not really unification, it was assimilation. He did not want the two parties to work together. Chiang's objective was simple. It was for the Kuomintang, the KMT, to be the dominant political party in China. And then I'll end with this, is that a leader's vision must be sort of lofty and forward-looking to some extent.
Yes.
And it is said that a statesman who keeps his ear permanently glued to the ground will have neither elegance of posture nor flexibility of movement. So it's important to strike that balance between being on the ground but having that forward-looking vision, which I think is what Mao had.
Yeah, I want to hear that first quote again.
You
have to substitute unity with consensus.
Yeah, so he said what Chiang wanted was not unification but assimilation. He did not want the two parties to work together. His objective was for the Kuomintang to be the dominant political party. Are you drawing parallels?
I am, indeed.
Well, guys, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Free to Air, and StarTimes.